Okay, Assalamu alaikum everyone. We're going to continue with our journey with rhetoric with Aristotle. In this video, what I want to look at is two things: argument and proof. Now, once you understand from the previous videos, I hope, what a rhetorical situation is, you need to do two main things. The first thing is you have to state your argument and then prove your argument. So two things: you have to state an argument and prove an argument. What a lot of people do in everyday discourse is they make an argument, but they don't actually substantiate or prove their argument. And so both argument and proof are at the heart of rhetorical invention, right? The what of your persuasion. So you need to have these things at your disposal. What's an argument, you ask me? We usually call an argument a thesis or a statement. It can usually be a single sentence, and it's something that establishes what we want to persuade the audience to believe about the issue at hand, right? That's the argument basically. So for example, someone might say we should go to war, or someone might say we should not go to war, or someone might say the defendant is guilty, or someone might even say the defendant is innocent, or someone might say this is beautiful, or someone might say this isn't really that beautiful. Whatever it may be, the argument is usually stated as a what's known as a declarative sentence. You declare something, and you'll remember from grammar. If you haven't done grammar, I'll just quickly recap. If you don't remember, that a sentence requires two things essentially. It requires a subject and a predicate, right? So the predicate declares or predicates something about the subject, right? So it's that something is a proposition. So let me give an example. If I say the defendant is guilty, the defendant is the subject because that's the person I'm talking about, and by declaring something about it, by saying it's he or she is guilty, that's called a predicate, right? So you have a subject and then you declare something about that subject. So a sentence is usually made of, at least in grammar, those two things as well. So going back to Plato, in Plato's Apology, for example, Socrates argues that he's innocent of the charges against him, right? He did not introduce, for example, new gods into the Greek pantheon, and he did not corrupt the young, right? And Socrates' argument is very simple. His thesis is very simple. I am innocent. I haven't done anything wrong. So that's the argument. What he needs to do then is to furnish the proof, and we'll talk about that later on. Now, because Aristotle believes that rhetoric should help our judgment and to help us make decisions, the argument itself is a decision about the subject or issue at hand, right? And the audience will then decide whether or not our judgment is a good one or not, right? If it is, our argument should influence the audience's thought, speech, and action in a general way, and in also in a very specific way. Right? It should inform them to take a specific course of action. So the argument is very, very important. So is the proof as well, of course. Of course, it's not enough to assert an argument, right? Because people will bring counter arguments, right? And you see this on social media. People throw arguments, but no one really proves their argument. They don't substantiate the claim that they're making, right? And so people throw counter arguments. So how can an audience decide whose argument is more persuasive, which is what rhetoric is about, if the rhetors only bring out counter arguments, right, or contending arguments, right? We must supply proofs. That's the second part. So you have the argument, now you need to supply proofs, and we must prove our argument. The question then is, how do you prove your argument, right? And remember that any rhetorical situation that you find yourself in, it has a variable, what's called a genre, right, or a kind of rhetoric. And if you remember in our previous videos, we talked about there's usually three kind of scenarios that you will find yourself in. They're not exhaustive, but generally speaking, when you're debating or you're in a situation where you need to use rhetoric, you'll find yourself in three situations. One of them is the political. You'll be in a political situation or something to do with politics. You'll be in a legal situation, something to do with law, or in some sort of ceremonial situation. I mean, there are others, And sometimes you might find that you need to use all three in some way, or two of them in some way, shape or form as well. So when Socrates has to defend himself, right, in his speech in the Apology, that's a legal genre, right, because he's defending himself, right. So even though he uses political and ceremonial rhetoric, the speech is primarily legal. He's making a legal speech, right? And so the most important thing here is proving any argument in any rhetorical situation, political, legal, or ceremonial. You have to draw upon a resource that pertain or that are particular to that genre. We'll talk about this in the next few videos, but the most important thing you need to remember is there are three scenarios you'll find yourself in, generally speaking: a legal, political, or ceremonial, and you have to know that. Which genre am I talking about? And then they will have, each three of them will have their own particular resources that you'll need to draw upon. Very, very important, okay? And so the three genres are related by features of the rhetorical acts that we could summarize by the terms what, when, and why, right? So you have three key features. What is basically what you're arguing about. What are you actually arguing about, right? When is in relation. So what is what a rhetor argues about? When he or she's argues. So when are you arguing this? I'll give you some examples. And why are you arguing, right? So what's the end goal? So what are you arguing about? When are you arguing about? What time? What past, present, or future? And what are you trying to achieve, right? You'll always find these features in of a rhetorical act, if you like, as well. So for example, if you take the political genre, if you're arguing in relation to politics, you're usually trying to persuade people or even dissuade people, for example, about something to do in the future, right? For example, if we take the current pandemic with the coronavirus, politicians or doctors even will try to persuade you to do something or dissuade you from doing something to do with the future, though, right? So can you see there's what are they doing? What are they trying to persuade you about to do with coronavirus? When are they talking about it? About the future, right? And what's the end goal? Well, they probably want you to take the injection or not, right? So that's a political example as well. In terms of legal, it's usually something to do with the past, to prosecute or defend someone in the past. So legal genre is usually something to do with the past, and it's usually trying to achieve something good. So you have to know that I'm in the political field, and I'm arguing usually about something to do with the future. I'm trying to make people, I'm convincing people to make a good decision, right? An ethical decision, the right decision. In legal discourse is usually something to do with the past, and I'm trying to persuade or dissuade or convict someone or free someone with regards to something that might have happened in the past. So can you see there's the what, the when, and the why. And in the ceremonial scenario, which we'll go through, you're usually trying to praise or blame something in the present, right, to achieve what is beautiful. And so we'll talk about that in much more detail in the coming videos, but usually there are three genres that you will be talking about in any rhetorical situation, right? Whether it's to do with the political, whether it's to do with the ceremonial or the legal, and you have to know that, right? And then you need to know what are you arguing about, when are you arguing about, and what are you seeking to achieve? What's your end goal? But remember, the grand narrative is you have to have an argument, and then you have to prove that argument as well. Okay. Now, a final thing that's really important, because somebody might get the impression, based on what we've said so far, that it's all about logic, it's all about being reasonable and rational. That's true. That is true. Rhetoric is part of that as well. But we must also realize that we are also to appeal to emotion and ethics, rather. Emotion ethics, right? So you must be logical to persuade your audience, and that your argument is reasonable, logical, than the counter argument, right? And every part of logic will be useful for inventing rhetorical proofs, right? But you're not trying to be a strict logician here, right? They must be satisfying for your audience, not only logically but also emotionally and ethically, right? So if you remember, you might have read Aristotle and Plato talk about this idea of the three parts of the human soul. And we have to use these three parts: reason, which is what we've talked about in logic. Then you have emotion and spirit, right? So we have to appeal to all of them. So we can't just always expect people to just be persuaded by reasonable, logical arguments. We also have to use what's known as ethics, and also we have to use what's known as emotion as well. So philosophy, for example, appeals to reason alone, right? Philosophy is all about reason. Rhetoric appeals to all three. It appeals to reason, it appeals to emotion, and it also appeals to our spirit as well. So each genre, just to summarize, each genre has topics of invention that are specific to it: political, legal, and ceremonial. And they'll have distinct lines of argumentation that you'll have to use certain rhetorical resources in these fields. And the appeal to logic has topics of invention which are common to all genres, and they'll have general lines of argument as well, right? We'll cover all of this later on as well, but you just need to remember that for now as well. In summary, the art of rhetoric requires invention, right? You're inventing something. You must state your arguments with its genre. So whether you're in the political, legal, or ceremonial field, you must have an argument. You must be able to prove your argument. There's an argument that you want to make. It will be something to do with the past, present, or future, and you must have your end goal as well, right? And you not only use reason, you not only use logic, but you will also use ethics and emotion to try and persuade people to take a certain course of action. I'll talk about these different genres in the next few videos, but that's what you need to know for now. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.